So from parents to students to educators to other school professionals, it would really be devastating for student growth, for opportunities in the world, and just for public education as a whole.
It's important to be part of a union because you have to have a voice.
Welcome to Union Talk. I'm Randi Weingarten.
Welcome to another episode of Union Talk. This is Randi Weingarten, and today I get to be joined by 4 AFT members who are teaching in classrooms every single day. Marsena Toney, an autistic support teacher in Philly. Heather Stambaugh, a high school social studies teacher in Greenon, Ohio. Rodney Fresh, also a high school social studies teacher, but from Detroit. And Jennifer Graves, a special ed teacher in New Haven, Connecticut. In this day and age, with everything that's going on with the Trump administration, it takes some courage to speak out. And so I really, really, really appreciate Marsena and Heather and Rodney and Jennifer joining me in this podcast today. So let me kind of cut to the chase, which is this. Regardless of who anybody voted for, and we had a great podcast a few weeks ago with a member who had voted for Trump and a member who had voted for Harris. And we talked about it with each other and to try to open the aperture, because at this point in time, President Trump is the president and will be the president for the foreseeable future. There is also an unelected billionaire by the name of Elon Musk, who seems to be co-president, but what he and President Trump are doing are things that no one really envisioned. I mean, some people who believe that they would bring a lot of autocracy probably envisioned it, but for regular people, nobody really envisioned that they would aim a wrecking ball not only at lots of things in the U.S. government, but directly at the U.S. Department of Education, and with it, the critical resources that go to supporting children in our communities. What we're seeing since he's been elected is that he wants to get rid of public education as we know it. And Elon Musk wants to get rid of public education as we know it. And whether they're talking about the Department of Education or whether they're talking about the funds that go through the Department of Education to children, the effect is going to be that 10% of the funding that kids get throughout the country will either be gone and go for tax cuts to the wealthy, or will actually still go to states, but in block grants, and will be used for vouchers, not for the purposes intended. And what kind of funds am I talking about? And then I'm going to ask our panel to actually make this live and make this really live. What am I talking about? There's 7.5 million students with disabilities, roughly about 15% of the students in America. They could lose the special ed services, including specialized teachers and therapists that are funded through what we know as IDEA. There's 26 million kids who live in poverty and get extra support through Title I. That's half our kids in America's public schools. Things like smaller class size, reading specialists, professional supports, mental health programs, community schools, preschools, after school, and summer programs. We don't have enough of these programs, and they want to cut these programs that serve 26 million kids. So now let's start doing the counting. 26 and 7.5. And then there's 12 million kids who benefit for the career and tech ed programs that help them master skills that they need for good jobs of today and tomorrow. We have been fighting for these programs tooth and nail so that there's an option for kids other than college prep. And they want to get rid of all of those programs. And then, of course, there's the 10 million students from working class families that get a much needed Pell Grant. Many kids who may be going to college in the first generation. And if I sound angry about all this, I am. These are things that kids need and that teachers need the support to do. This is not money that should be going to billionaire tax cuts or money that should be going to vouchers. So this is what's all at risk. And these 4 folks who are with me today, these 4 amazing AFT members and teachers, Marsena, Heather, Rodney, and Jennifer will actually make this real for anybody who's listening for the next half an hour or so. So I want to say to all of you, number one, thank you, not only for joining me today, but for the work that you do each and every day for not only our kids, but you do it in so many ways, whether you're from New Haven or Greenon or Detroit or Philadelphia. These are not easy situations to teach in, and you bring passion and purpose every single day. So I just want to ask, and I'll keep on changing up the order, but I'm going to start with Marsena and then Jenny and then Heather and then Rodney. When I say these big numbers, or when I say that they could get rid of Title I, IDEA, Pell Grants, CTE grants, grants for rural schools, grants for community schools, what's your first reaction to all of this? I'll start with Marsena.
Thanks, Randy. And I want to say just thank you for having us here, because this is a privilege and an honor just to be able to speak on behalf of all educational professionals, the behalf of our students and parents. IDEA is a federal law that should be upheld and maintained at the federal level. And this is about more than just accountability, but accessibility and the health and well-being for students and from diverse needs in all children, from early intervention children all the way up to the university. They should be protected, and Congress had the responsibility to do that. When you talk about the numbers, 7.5 million students locally, to lose local educational support, 15% of that in terms of the specialized needs, the paraprofessionals you mentioned, the mental health components, speech therapists, occupational therapists. They also have physical therapy. All of these things are necessary just for many of these children to have access to a free and appropriate public education.
Absolutely. Jenny.
Yes. Hi. Being an urban district here in New Haven, federal cuts would be absolutely devastating. Here in the state of Connecticut, we received $321 million of federal funds for education. And in New Haven, we get $21 million of federal funding. Our schools are already grossly underfunded in Connecticut. We are really, really struggling already and constantly working in a deficit model to support not only general education students, but especially our most vulnerable population, our multilingual learners, our students with disabilities. The majority of our students go to Title I schools. They all receive free breakfast and lunches. It would be absolutely devastating to lose this. And as a parent here in New Haven County, my son receives a Pell Grant to go to Connecticut State University. So knowing that teachers don't make the salaries that we so well deserve, I would not afford to pick up college tuition right now to send my son to a 4-year school. So from parents to students to educators to other school professionals, it would really be devastating for student growth, for opportunities in the world, and just for public education as a whole.
Thank you so much. So, Heather, when you hear this, when you hear the magnitude of this, you thinking about your district, and it's so great that you're here, what do you think?
Our district is relatively small. We're not the smallest that we could be in our area, but when you talk about numbers, to compare numbers with larger places like New Haven, when Jennifer just spoke, it wouldn't feel the same apples to apples to say like, oh, I've got 3 title teachers, I've got this, I've got that. We ran our numbers recently, and being a district of around 1,500 kiddos, K-12, and 46.7% of those are low income in our area, I think our community would be flabbergasted by that. Then to start looking at what services are provided with these federal dollars to us specifically, and those early reading interventions are huge for kiddos that probably outsiders looking in would go, well, that's an affluent area. And it may be to some, but it's not to all. And then if we push those kiddos back into our gen ed classrooms, it's a domino effect. It's a domino effect of we can't reach every child with everything that they need. And then that just goes on this cycle. And we have a very healthy and thriving Facebook mom tribe. And I think that they would be the first ones. Why is my child's education suffering? I didn't realize this cut pushed these kids back into regular classrooms. We're already stretched really thin with our reading title RIMPs, meeting our conditions for that. And then we do house 3 high needs intensive resource room, kids who need one-on-one aid sometimes, kiddos who need very personal things done for them on a day-to-day basis. And those are all things that we receive assistance in funding. And our district cannot make up those funds. And in Ohio, of course, we've long known that our property tax is unconstitutional, and we don't do anything to change that. And the way that other things are being suggested in our community, because we're near an Air Force base, there's a really good chance that our community can't pick up this financial slack.
Yeah. Yeah. What you just said, Heather, is what I've heard from so many people, which is that these resources are absolutely indispensable to people. And then who's going to pick them up if they're no longer there? They actually are some of the most important resources that schools get, because they go directly to services that parents see and feel and that teachers absolutely need to support kids. And how are they going to be replaced if they're no longer there? Rodney, you dealt with so many cuts over so many years in terms of Detroit. When you hear this, after, as we're kind of getting over the hump of all of the cuts in Detroit, what are you thinking about these numbers and the magnitude of these cuts?
I'm just blown away. Like you said, we were a district that went through bankruptcy. We had the literacy lawsuit, which I was also involved in. And so Title I, Title II dollars, like 32% of our budget right now is federal funding. It's key. We're at a state, since we came out of bankruptcy, that we can't leverage all of our meals because we're still paying down old state debt. And so I think I just want to put a face on it, because I had a student that had an internship from a CTE program, and her internship was put on hold because the funding was put on hold. And I didn't even realize it. I'm like, why haven't you left for VOTEC? And she was like, I haven't been placed yet. And then she kind of told me, it's because the funding froze right now, so we don't know what's going to happen with the program. And I just think we all work at districts that are already stretched thin. We're all doing 3 and 4 jobs. We have students taking speech online because there aren't enough speech teachers. And the playing field is already unlevel. Now you're just going to put a crater in the middle of the playing field, and it's just morally irresponsible.
Yeah. So look, for our listeners, here you have 4 classroom teachers who understand exactly what the needs of this funding is and are basically saying, they're being much nicer than I'm about to do, but what in terms of this. So I just want to actually kind of drill down on some of this. Jen, you let us use this information that you're a parent of a student with an IEP, and you talked a little bit about this. What would happen in New Haven if there's none of these funds? We already only get 17% of the funds. 42% was promised by the federal government when they passed IDEA, and they never got past 17%. IDEA is only like 20% funded. What would happen if all of a sudden all the IDEA funds are gone? What would happen?
I'll tell you, Randy, being a mother of a student with complex needs has always been a very scary and lonely journey, now more than ever. I have 2 children who would both be affected by cut in federal funds, one through a Pell Grant and one through his special education services at a school. My son's a sophomore in high school, and he is just starting a transitional program to help prepare him for life after high school. And I'm terrified that his program is going to be cut. What opportunities is he going to have after high school? He will lose job internships that are placed from his school and specific skills training. And as his parent, of course, I can role play for interviews and teach him how to manage adult responsibilities, but nothing compared to what he would receive with a fully funded school to help him become a successful and productive member of society. So it is a very scary time for me as a mother. and for all parents.
Yeah. And we feel your pain. And we also, part of the reason that we're staging this National Day of Action locally throughout the country on March 4th is just like we're doing on this podcast. We're actually talking to people about what this really means. Like the absence of these resources. This is not like a marginal dollar that a principal could spend in having an extra elective class. This is actually losing services that people rely on right now. And if you don't have those services, how is a parent going to afford them privately? Services that are supposed to be part and parcel of what somebody's individual education plan is. I want to actually go to the social studies teachers for a moment. And then, Marsena, I'm going to go back to you in terms of a question for you. But in terms of the social studies teachers, the last time I checked the Constitution, and it's not like I read it every moment, but it was Article 1, Article 2, and Article 3, which, were supposed to be 3 equal branches of government. So let me just put you into a teaching position right now as opposed to an advocacy position. Like, how would you teach your class that the President of the United States of America took away funding that was already appropriated from the Congress? Like, how would you deal with the teaching about this? How do we deal with it? And you can see from a little bit of my sarcasm dripping down my voice, I mean, it's a clear violation of Article 1. The Congress appropriates the money. The executive is supposed to actually implement and execute what the Congress does. So what would the two of you do? And particularly since everything will take on ideological, taint, even though this seems like a clear violation. How would you address this if you had to actually teach about this in class, or would you just completely avoid it?
So I'll go because it's actually, I've had a student actually bring it up and I was surprised. He goes, with everything going on, I thought Congress controlled spending. I go, you're right. And so we looked at it and we had a discussion. Well, how is this possible? And so they're like, well, what is Congress going to do? And I was like, I don't know, to be honest. And so I basically talked to them about, if you're concerned about this, okay, let's write some letters. Let's look up our Congress people's emails and phone numbers, and kind of gave them ways that they could actually become active in the political process, because they were like, well, we can't vote. I'm like, but we can do other things. We can protest. And so I went back to, let's remember who our U.S. House Representative is. I'm like, we actually have a good one here, and she's actually come to the school a couple of times. And so I kind of did it that way, a way to actually get involved in the process. So,
right. Heather.
My students have stayed pretty grounded in the period of time that we're in and don't bring a lot of the current events into the classroom right now. But I know my colleagues are struggling that teach government. If I were dealing with it myself, I very much appreciate Rodney's take on what are someone's avenues. I would probably spend my time taking it back to the Constitution specifically, which is sort of what I did with secession today in AP, which is that where does it say it? Where does it outline it? Where historically have those balances come from? And because really at a certain point too, the students have to be given the opportunity to ask themselves, who is not doing the checking and balancing? As much as somebody is taking too much or doing differently, the silence from the side that carries the burden of doing the checks and balances is also very much a talking point. If you can get students to not only acknowledge that maybe there's a line being crossed, or at least examine where the line sits, but also who is being quiet and why are they being quiet?
Yeah, good point. And I know, Marsena, you teach younger children. I know each of the school districts that we're talking about have a want for funding, but Philadelphia is still a special case. And the question I have for you is, what would happen if your kids with autism had to be in a regular classroom setting all day as opposed to the supports that you give them, what happened to your kids?
As an educator, teaching young children with autism is a wonderful challenge. The time and effort that it takes to create individualized visual schedules, and for students who are nonverbal, the commitment to continuously create individualized academic tasks to ensure that their learning opportunities are authentic and aligned with their individual education plan. Teaches students how to utilize discrete trial training, which is an evidence-based scientific approach rooted in the principles of applied behavior analysis. And this involves breaking down small components, small skills, so that they can learn the larger concepts of things. So in order for all of this to happen within a classroom size of 27 to 30 students, this would be a disaster, to say the least. We have already dwindled down a lot of funds after COVID, and we're trying to now pick up the pace in terms of academic achievement, reading and math, and the slightest changes in children with autism schedule can send them into a meltdown, let alone the overstimulation, the overpopulation, just a number of things that happens within a regular general ed classroom that can be accounted for in a smaller class size. So either the regulation having to either dim down the lights or just hold or console a student. Those things are very difficult to do when you have to tend to the needs of 30 children opposed to 8 students in the classroom. It's almost impossible to give them the attention that they need. So these changes that are being proposed are very disheartening. And I can't even imagine what that would look like for these students.
Yeah.
I couldn't imagine.
Thank you, Marsena. I'm going to go from Marsena, from our youngest students, to Rodney, to our seniors. So one of the cuts that is being contemplated is Pell. So even though Linda McMahon in her hearing said she would like to have more Pell, not less Pell, what we're starting to hear is that Pell Grants are on the table as well. In fact, in the bill that the House of Representatives may be passing today, they have said that there's billions of dollars of cuts to student loans, and Pell Grants are part of the student loan program. So I know you have some seniors who are graduating or about to graduate. Some of them are scared about losing financial aid. So the question I have for you is, what are you hearing from your kids, from your seniors?
They are concerned, to say the least, because one of the things I like to do with them is once they get their financial aid award letters is we kind of go over it, because they usually have a hard time understanding, okay, this is a grant, this is a loan, or this is a work study, and what does that mean? And a number of them have Pell Grants listed on their award letter. And so they're like, well, is it going to be funny and I'm going to have financial aid? And for a lot of them, for the first time, I'm seeing there's already big gaps in what's being awarded compared to what normally I've seen in the past awarded, where you still have like a $5,000-$6,000 gap in a lot of cases. And so there's a real life anxiety and fear of, I'm ready to select the schools, but I don't know how I'm going to pay for it. And if I don't have the Pell Grant, because all of the award letters I've seen from kids so far have listed Pell Grant as part of their financial aid package. And so they, to say the least, this is the first year where I would say going into March, April, a lot of the kids are unsure what's going to happen next year.
And how do you can tell I'm even stammering in the question, what do you say to them when they get this concerned about it?
It's heartbreaking. You try to find alternative. I've done scholarship hunts at this point for some, just to make sure if something does happen, okay, we have a fallback plan. And let's just say in a perfect world, Pell Grants are still around. At least now you have some additional scholarship money. So just giving them suggestions on how we can work around things and just trying to stay positive, even though my heart breaks for some of them when you see that you have the Pell Grant and you still have a gap though too. So
yeah. And Heather, I'm always been amazed about how rural schools and rural communities really love and need their public schools. And in fact, we've seen in so many places where people have voted for Donald Trump, and yet they've also voted for tax levies to go up, or they voted the voucher programs down in Kentucky and in Nebraska because they understood what was going on, even though they overwhelmingly voted for Donald Trump. So the question I have for you is, how do you navigate through these particular issues? How do you do what, and I know you and I watched you do it so effectively, how do you navigate the ideological issues that are used as defunding mechanisms? Because I've watched it in terms of your schools. It's amazing. And so talk to our listening audience about how you navigate this.
Our bottom line, our common denominator is the same. Our community, our kids, and it is OUR. And that is 99% of the time, no matter how wayward a conversation feels like it can go, this is a shared space. A lot of my teachers still work and live in this community. Our kids go through here. So our common denominator is ultimately all things equal. I think that when you start to speak to someone who feels so far apart, the number one thing is you really can't make it feel like an attack. You have to, and it's weird to say like deal in facts, because we know how some people feel about the word facts nowadays, but you have to deal in intangibles, I guess, instead of saying facts. And what's tangible to the farmer down the street is, are our children staying when they're adults? Do they want this to still be their home? Do they feel rooted here because our community does take a great pride in how long it has been here and how it has grown, but maintained this feeling of rural? And when you're able to talk to them about the reality of students don't want to stay here a minute longer than they have to, or that students need to have skills to be successful and citizens, those are things that you can really meet somebody with, because everybody wants citizens that are helping, paying their fair share. I mean, it really doesn't matter red, blue, purple as far as your voting trend. It really is, can you provide to students something that puts them out in the world in a better place? And they want someone who's going to pay the taxes when they're old and on their homestead loans. And they're going to want people to buy houses here if they sell their farmland to a developer. And we have to have something that is attractive for people to do that if that's what the farmer down the road wants. And, you know, all moms want their kids to be well taken care of at school and feel the safety coming not only from the staff, but from the building. And these are things that in reality you lose when you cut teachers. Listening to Marsena talk, you put students in a classroom and it's overwhelming for them. It's also having impacts on the students who aren't prepared for that, who don't know what's going on, who don't know how to help but want to help. And the time it takes away from the educator. And then when mom's like, well, you didn't see my kid cut their finger with their scissors. Well, there's 35 of them in here, and I had this very severe situation going on. I'm sorry I didn't see Billy with the scissors. They can all understand that impact because, again, our equalizer is the same, our kids.
That's amazing. Just like all of you, this is why I wanted to talk to teachers in classrooms right now, because you open the aperture. You're meeting community where they are, not just our children where they are. So I'm going to ask one more big final question, and I'm going to start with Jennifer, but I'm going to set it up this way, which is that you have all described very powerfully the impact these cuts would have on your students and the caring that you have about our kids and your students is just so palpable. And I am so just moved by it in so many ways. And I can't express enough my gratitude. So, we're a union. We can't just sit here and do nothing. And so we are doing a lot. And part of what we're doing is protecting kids, just like we teach in classrooms all across the country. That's where you start in terms of protecting kids and standing up for communities in the communities in which we live. That's where we show up. And too often people show up just in Washington. And too often people show up where it's convenient to show up. We're showing up in our schools and in our communities to protect our kids and protect public education as the essential good that it is. And, we're doing it in different kinds of ways, but March 4th, March for our kids, March 4th is a day where AFT and so many others are now going to act all throughout the day in actions across the country to say no to these cuts and to protect our kids, our schools, and our communities. And so, Jen, I know you're planning something big with community partners that day. So what's March 4th going to look like in New Haven? And then I'm going to let everybody else kind of jump in if they want to. And let me just say before I ask you, this is not big actions. This is not like a big action of thousands of people in the middle of Times Square or the middle of a town square. This is really actions within our schools where we're kind of connecting the dots. It could be as simple as leafleting before or after schools, but it could be a teaching, it could be a walking, it could be a bunch of different things. But, it's kind of like show and tell time now in terms of really showing people what we're doing. And I know, Jen, you're planning something with community partners that day. So what is it going to look like in terms of New Haven?
Oh, Randi, we are very excited for March 4th. Our membership is really activating. We have spent the last couple of years really building our organizing muscle, and we are part of Connecticut for All, which is an organization of over 60 different unions, different faith organizations, different community partners that are all working on a common goal of building a more just Connecticut for all. So we have over 10 different coalition partners, community partners, other unions joining us, co-sponsoring our event on March 4th. We are gathering at our Connecticut State Community College Gateway in New Haven. We're going to have speakers from AFT Higher Ed, parents, students. We're going to show up wearing red for ed. We are going to march to the New Haven Green, where we are going to hear from parents and teachers and different speakers of how we are not accepting President Trump and his decisions to really harm our students and our communities. It's not acceptable. We are not supportive of it. And we are going to continue to fight until we know that our kids are safe, our families are safe. We are very excited. We even have the Teamsters showing up with their big 18-wheeler, blaring their horns in front of City Hall on the Green. So we are very, very excited.
Fantastic. Sounds great. And what time is it going to be in New Haven?
4 o'clock.
What time? 4 o'clock.
Yep. 4
p.m. in New Haven.
Yes. We are very, very excited.
Fantastic. And spoiler alert over here, Detroit has something big planned too. Rodney, do you want to talk a little bit about what's going on in Detroit?
So we're all planning on wearing red on March the 4th for Ed. We're going to do a clap-in in all the schools. So that's exciting. I know the kids are already looking forward to it because I kind of already mentioned it to them. We're doing literacy drop-off for parents and community members about, what's everything that's going on. We're going to do a teaching Zoom citywide at 4:30 on March the 4th. And then we're going to, after the Zoom, plan for some more community action. So we're really, really excited about everything. And I know the kids they're like, oh, we're getting clapped in and it's not the first day of school. So they're just like, the high school kids are excited about that. So
I love that. Clapped in. I love it. Okay. And I know Philadelphia is planning something, and I know there's several other things being planned in Ohio as well. I don't know if Marsena or Heather want to jump in on this or not.
So in Philadelphia, we're actually doing some of the same things that Jenny is doing over in New Haven. We are ready to stand in partnership with our New Haven partners in Connecticut and in Detroit and Ohio. And I think that this is something that touches us on a national level. And if individuals are looking for a return on their investment in education, then they need to realize they first need to invest in education, invest in our children. You can't expect to see something and all you desire to do is abstract and detest and take things away from us. So we need to stand together firmly, holding hands side by side, because this is our future. It's not every decision that is made today affects tomorrow. And so we need to really stand firm and be passionate and be purposeful in everything that we're doing. So we are with you guys here in Philadelphia, and we're going to make our voices heard and known, and we will not sit down on this one.
Fantastic.
Absolutely. Ohio had their planning meeting with OFT yesterday. So there are absolutely things going on throughout Ohio. I am hoping to get my little map dot to at least where Red for Ed. We're still kind of trying to figure out where we fit. Like I said, we do toe a fine line here. So we'll figure out what fits for us. But absolutely, so much is happening. And you guys all sound like you are in phenomenally strong places. And that is absolutely great to hear what's going on out there.
But you know something, I would just say, Heather, the fact that what's going to happen is rural schools in our rural areas are going to actually save us in terms of just that connection that we have of educators in rural areas, where people then start saying, this is not political in the way in which people traditionally look at politics. This is about our kids and our kids' futures. So the fact is that everything that you do on some levels is so much more impactful, because people just dismiss, given that if you look at where Jenny is, if you look at where Marsena is, if you look at where Rodney is, they all have congresspeople who have every single day understood the importance of education and stand up for it. And in some ways, if we can actually create that everywhere, like we saw with those other votes, then we're going to turn the situation around. So I'm just doing what the other three teachers on this podcast would do for you anyway, which is to lift you up and to say thank you for all of your efforts too. So I want to see if there's any last thoughts for our amazing panel, as I basically say to all of our listeners, there's going to be actions all across the country on March 4th, and you see the excitement that our folks have about actually connecting the dots with parents and community about what we do, how important it is, and why we need these federal funds to do what we do. We frankly need more, not less. We frankly need fully funded schools. We frankly need the federal government to be doing more for our kids than for billionaires. I mean, it just seems so simple to us, but we have to fight for this. So we are not just teaching in classrooms and preparing for our kids. We got to fight for what kids need, and we have to fight to protect our kids. So it's not too late to plan something, a clap in, Red for Ed, march to the Village Green, a leafleting. It's not too late. We have over 100 events already, but every single day it gets more and more in terms of March for and protect our kids. There's a toolkit and resources at our website, www.aft.org/protectourkids. I'm going to say it again, www.aft.org/protectourkids. And this is about making sure our kids come first. This is about prioritizing our kids and prioritizing their future and prioritizing opportunity. And the funding that is at risk is really going to take as I said before, a wrecking ball to our kids and to their futures. So, any last comments? I'm going to start with Heather this time, and then Marsena, and then Rodney, and I'm going to end with Jenny. Any last comments that we can actually just say to our listeners about the importance of this funding to the amazing work that you all do?
I always try to bring anything that I'm doing for education and students back to the fact that this is one of the quintessentially American things, is a free and equal education, or as close as we can get it. These are foundations that, Thomas Jefferson supported. And we are trying to ensure that students who already have struggles, hurdles, things to overcome, things that are in their way, that those are eliminated so that they have that. But it also benefits every child in every classroom when teachers can have small group, can have whole group, and can support everybody as they need to. And that is what this funding is about. I really appreciated, Randy, when you mentioned, I had mentioned before on something else, like, this isn't misspent money. This isn't mismanaged money. This isn't going into pockets. This is all dog-eared. This is all so specific, the criteria to have these funds. And it services such key demographics, but those demographics getting the services that they need uplift everybody in that community, whether it's a building, a whole district, a community. And this is not something that we can just stand idly by and ignore.
Thank you, Heather. Marsena.
Underfunding is a widespread issue, and it has been for decades, and it creates tremendous barriers to learning and providing equitable access and opportunities to all students, particularly students of lower income communities. And we are talking about cutting resources and cutting people and cutting positions. This affects everyone at a fundamental, health and well-being, the mental health, the emotional health of the parents, of the students, of the staff, staff burnout, and maintaining and retaining teachers and keeping our educational facilities and everyone healthy and a morale healthy within a building. These things are serious when it comes to just the overall well-being of our nation.
Thank you, Marsena. Rodney.
So I guess my last word is education is supposed to be the great equalizer. I don't know how districts like Detroit and Philadelphia survive, but just the number of students that we have that it supports is unprecedented. I'm hopeful because I think some people are starting to wake up and say, hold on, like, everybody understands how important education is and how key it is to shaping America's future. We literally teach America's future every single day. So that is my final thought. Like, in some countries, we are considered heroes, and here, like, it's a thankless job, and yet still we get up every single day because the future of America is in our hands every single day. We shape the doctors, the future politicians, the future lawyers, the future engineers. And so I want people to remember that no matter how you feel is we're literally responsible every single day for shaping America's future.
Thank you, Rodney. Jen.
Rodney, I really appreciate you using the word hope, because I do have hope. It's the legislative session here in Connecticut. We do have a House bill on the table that's all about special education. And I have hope. I really, truly do. I'm going up to the Capitol a lot. I'm testifying. And what I'm hearing and what I'm seeing is that teachers, students, parents, supervisors, superintendents, this is the first time I'm hearing everyone have the same message. We have to make sure that we are following our moral and legal obligation to service children to the extent that they need. And federal funding we cannot survive without this funding. What would it mean for the futures of our children who are going to grow up and run this country? It is very, very frightening. But I do have hope. I feel connected so deeply with all of you here. And it doesn't matter if you're in Detroit or Ohio or Philadelphia. We are all here together doing this work. And I really think this is going to be a pivotal time for educators to stand up and rise to the occasion. So I'm hopeful and concerned, but I am ready for the work ahead. I know that you guys are ready for the work ahead. And we will do everything in our power to make sure that all children are educated, safe, and loved.
Well, I don't think I could end on anything better than what the four of you just said. And notion of hope, which is kind of our middle name as school teachers, finding the light, finding ways, really regardless of what resources we get, helping our kids succeed, but the willingness to do all of this, not just to work in classrooms, but to do all of this each and every day. I'm just so moved to have this conversation with you, Heather, and you, Rodney, and you, Marsena, and you, Jen. I just can't thank you enough. A lot of people ask me, why do I do what I do? Or what am I thinking about these days, given what, the assaults we get from Trump each and every moment? And frankly, it's because of people like the four of you. I am so honored to represent you, and I'm so grateful that you do this work. So everybody who's listening, these four teachers are telling you why we need these funds, and work with us. Help us on March 4th. Call your congresspeople. Make sure that we don't get less money for our kids, but we actually get more money. But at least make sure that we keep the federal funds, the Title I, the IDEA, the Pell Grants, Career Tech Ed, the rural grants, the community school grants. We need these funds, and we need more so that we can actually help our kids. Don't convert these funds to billionaire tax cuts or to block grants. That's what we're saying to all of you. And you've heard Jen and Marsena and Rodney and Heather say it a whole lot better than I could ever say it. So this is Union Talk. And thanks for listening to this episode, and be with us on March 4th. Thank you.
Public schools are under attack. The Trump administration wants to slash education funding while giving tax breaks to billionaires. On March 4th, we're fighting back. Join educators, parents, and advocates to demand no more cuts to our schools. Take action. Visit www.aft.org/protectourkids.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of Union Talk. Remember to subscribe wherever you listen to your podcast, and tune in every other week for a new episode. Thank you, be safe, and be well.